right, people, we back. Victory and Vices podcast. Me, Rory Spooner, James Veck, and Reese Henley. And as you can see, we've got a very, very special guest. The first ever female on Victory and Vices, though some say Reese does have female tendencies. We've got Kendall Rowan. Kendall, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. Very much appreciated. We're looking forward to this all day to have a chat with you. Reese in particular about Newcastle, because he has Mike Ashley campaign that you are going to love, right? He cannot stand the guy. So
yeah,
it's about to go off. But yeah, as we were saying before we came on, obviously, we wanted just to take a bit of time, not just for us to get to know you, but the general public, because, you know, you're doing very well on IG, you're doing very well on YouTube, you know, you've had various media things that you've done. So obviously, just for a bit of context for people that maybe haven't seen you, that are sort of tuning in right now, how did you obviously, you know, get started on the YouTube side of things?
Yeah, so just obviously before I started recording, I was just saying that I was cabin crew before I did any YouTube, and obviously with the aviation industry being one of the hardest hit with the pandemic and stuff, so my job kind of was ended in April time last year. So I just needed something to distract me, and I'd been on like various fan cams before, Newcastle related, nothing major, just, you know, 5 minutes or so. And I'd been on Sky Sports last year as well to talk about the takeover when it fell through.
Yeah.
So just through the fan cams. And then it just kind of bankrolled from there, to be honest. I was asked to go on to a ladies only Newcastle podcast on a Monday, which I still do now. And then, yeah, just the sort of opportunities kept rolling in from there, and I started doing my own videos. Not as consistent as I was on other podcasts and other YouTube channels, but I started doing my own videos, and yeah, just the opportunities of, as I say, bankrolled from there, and I've just been on several other things. I've been on Sky Sports again, yeah, things like that. So it was a good idea to get started, really.
Yeah, no, it was. Obviously, you're an intriguing character. I mean, the Sky Sports thing, you know, is a hell of a thing to have on any resume, let alone someone that's just starting off. How did it come about specifically?
So I do things with the Magpie channel, which is originally what I started with probably about a year and a half ago now. Yeah. I do like post-match reactions, things like that. I was just approached through social media to do that, and that was even before I started YouTube. Wow. So I mean, shout out to Keg and Matty, because they were the ones who started me off on this whole journey, really. And then Matty was asked to, because the Magpie channel is one of the biggest Newcastle fan channels that is around, they approached him and asked if he would do an interview based on the takeover outside St James's Park when it fell through, and he agreed. And then Keith Downey, who is the North East football correspondent for Sky Sports, asked if there was anyone else he could recommend to talk about the takeover falling through and their thoughts on Mike Ashley, and he put me forward for it. And then Keith liked what my interview and what I had said, so just went from there, really. And that's how I got. I've kept a pretty good rapport with Keith, and that's how I've got to do it again this time. But talking about Steve Bruce, because, you know, it's never love in the Newcastle camp. There's always something going on. So yeah, this is about Steve Bruce and him getting sacked this time.
Oh yeah, that's toxic. All right, yeah, it's interesting because obviously, you know, females now are getting pushed to the forefront at, you know, places like ESPN, Sky Sports, BT, all these other sort of, you know, massive media platforms. And with YouTube, to be honest with you, like, I didn't really know a lot of female YouTubers talking about football, and then when I see you and I see your numbers, I think, oh, hang on a minute, there is a market for it, and obviously you would be at the forefront of that. Who else is there out there that you know of that is like quite big in the female football world doing YouTube? Is there anyone in particular other than yourself?
Yeah, so there is a whole group called Gold Diggers. They are a big female podcast. They mostly deal around the top six, because I have, I say the big six. So, you know, Tottenham, Man United, things like that. And I met them through doing, obviously, YouTube. Anita, she was the co-founder of Gold Diggers, she does the football tours with me. So they're the main ones. I've met loads of other, obviously, women who don't necessarily, you know, do YouTube, but they do lots of podcasts, and through that they've started their own podcasts. There's She Devils United, who are Man United based.
I saw that the other day, actually. There was a big thing on Twitter with them the other day, was that right?
Yeah, there was there was some controversy with one of the girls who's on there, and her thoughts of Paul Pogba. But I know Mary personally, and I love the girl. She's amazing. I've done stuff with her in the past. So, you know, it was awful to see, but social media is what it is. You can't stop someone from running with an agenda no matter what, who you are. So
you're right. Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that actually. Obviously, you know, even in this sort of Zoom room now, it's very, you know, well, I'll say we're alpha males. We're all right lads. Like, you know, we're not that alpha, but I mean, in terms of the industry, yeah, I'll big myself up. Yeah, in terms of the industry itself, though, it is, you know, it is very male dominated. In terms of the drawbacks you found thus far, like, what are the positives and negatives you've encountered of putting yourself out there thus far?
When I first started, it was mostly I got a lot of negativity. And the strangest thing is, which I always find very strange, is that the negativity came from my own club fans. Pretty much every other fan, like, who I've come across, because the Football Terrace, I'm honoured to say that I'm the only member of the Football Terrace who isn't a fan of a Big Six club. And from that, obviously, I get a lot of love from Tottenham fans, Arsenal fans, things like that. And it was actually my own fan base who trolled me in the beginning, like a lot of it. I had it incessantly for months. Just basically, it was like they used my football knowledge as a reason to slate other things about me. So, like, my appearance, I've had in the past, like, this girl doesn't know what she's talking about. They haven't watched me or watched my videos or anything, but they've said, oh, this girl doesn't know anything about football. She just cares about being Instagram famous. I'm like, well, not really, because like, if that's what I cared about, I would be sitting on YouTube, like, chatting about football. Do you know what I mean? Like, and at the end of the day, you're sitting watching me on YouTube. If your football opinion was better than mine, like, where are you? Do you know what I mean? So I have called people out on that in the past. But to be honest, lately, I would say the past 3 months, when I've started getting more exposure and, like, getting, you know, like, being available on more things, I've getting a lot more support and a lot more love. And I think it's just a total, like, it's the epitome of social media. Like, no one really cares unless you're important. And now that people are taking notice of me, like, I had a thread made about me by a random Tottenham fan the other day. And it's bizarre to me that people, like, really just will not know you personally, and will run with an agenda. And the only other thing that annoys me about being a female in, like, a male orientated world is that men, I won't even say it's just men, because it is females as well. And people call you, like, a pick-me and, like, a bird, because they think that you, like, love football because you want to be with, like, you want to impress a guy, like, it's really strange. But men, on the other hand, will say, like, oh, you really do know your stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I watch the same 90 minutes and then some as you do. I see the same stats you do. I'm not watching, like, a different stream through my eyes because I'm a woman. Like, I'm literally watching the same thing you do. I have been involved in football for as long as I can remember. My whole family involved in football, like, back to my granddad, who was, like, physio for England in the 70s. So, like, I am so involved in football. I know the game inside out. I don't play myself, but, like, I've watched it a million times, from grassroots to, you know, Champions League. So it's just strange that people are, like, surprised that you kind of understand and know what's going on. It's a very strange way to look at things, like.
No, you're right. It is. You know, people don't know you personally, but for some reason they take things very personally. You know, you could make a throwaway comment, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got God knows how many people trying to fight you in Twitter comments. It's happened to me before, and it continually happens to me. I embrace it a little bit, right? Because I like a little bit of trolling back. You know, I'll give. You know, if you're going to give me some, I'm going to give you, you know, 10 times back. So to me, I don't mind, but it is frustrating. I totally get where you're coming from. But we'll talk about Newcastle now. You've mentioned obviously your football knowledge. I know Reese is desperate to actually talk to you about Newcastle, him being Mr. Newcastle on this podcast. So Reese, take it away. Newcastle, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, I think I am the Newcastle correspondent for this podcast, aren't I? And especially in a pool of two other Man United fans, I'm often pushing back against you guys. But I think, you know, as a Newcastle fan, I'm going to likely agree with the majority of things that Kendall says, in fairness. But, you know, I just wanted to get your view on just the whole saga at the moment with what's going on at the club, not just, you know, with the takeover, but more recently, you know, with Steve Bruce and his performances and things. And there's a whole lot of paid professional people out there, pundits, who will defend Steve Bruce to the hilt. And for me, I don't really understand it, but the trend is that they are all doing so and they are all backing him, and I don't really understand it. But I just, from someone like yourself who has been on Sky Sports News and obviously has got a successful YouTube channel going, and in all these podcasts, I just want to get your view on the whole thing.
Well, recently I found out. I just thought, that they were his friends, and he's got a lot of friends in the English media, especially because he is, from his Man United days, he is so well known in the British media. And obviously he was a close friend of Mike Ashley's, which is how he ended up getting the job. Because as you'll probably know, Reece, he was actually 12th choice manager. If what I've heard rightly from sources in the past, he actually approached Newcastle to take the job. He wasn't asked directly, so that just shows you everything, really. But recently I found out that a lot of these people, so Darren Bent, for example, Chris Sutton, Robbie Savage, Gary Neville, they're all represented by the same booking agency as Steve Bruce. That, to me, whether or not someone's going to say that that's nothing to do with it, I do obviously think they're going to, back their ally, if you will.
Yeah.
So that, to me, obviously tells me a lot. The rest of it, luckily, we were very lucky the other night, because normally I don't rate Jamie Carragher. I rate him as a pundit because I think he's quite knowledgeable and obviously very detailed in his punditry. However, normally I just think he just says random controversial things. But he did really, really hit the nail on the head the other night when him and Gary Neville were arguing over the whole Steve Bruce, Mike Ashley thing. And that was so big for me because, we're not represented enough. The fans' voices aren't represented enough for Newcastle United in the media. It's always, Steve Bruce is doing well with what he's got. He's had 100 million. It's not slim pickings, if you will. There's teams who spent way less than him. And I think Rafa probably only had that roughly in his whole time there. Things like that. So it's just always an excuse. It's always an excuse for him. He's doing well for what he's got. The owner's rubbish. And yes, we know that. We know that the owner is the problem. I always use an analogy. So I always say Mike Ashley is the disease and Steve Bruce is just a symptom of the disease. But for me, that's something you can treat quicker. You can treat a symptom quicker than you can a whole disease. So right now, I don't want to go back. Obviously, as you know, I don't want to go back to 2016 when we sacked McLaren too late and ended up getting relegated again, because I feel like obviously now is the time to utilise a transfer window. And yes, we've been told that we don't have no cash for transfers. That's fine. We've probably got a couple of loan spaces available. Obviously, now that Rolando Aarons has left, that's left another squad space. There's probably going to be a couple more lower level outgoings. And if you bring a manager in beyond this transfer window, because it's now coming to an end, that's again going to be a missed opportunity because you're not going to have that to utilise till the summer and it's going to be too late.
Yeah. Sorry. So, about the manager thing, right? They do need to bring someone in now, and they won't. Learning from your lessons is a key thing as an owner, as a football club owner. And in 2008, when they got relegated, they gave Shearer 8 games, and forever now it's a blot on Alan Shearer that he took Newcastle down. And they gave him 8 games. 2016, I think they waited until they were 8 points away from safety to bring in Rafa Benitez, and so Mike Ashley doesn't have a record of learning his lessons, going for the cheap option. I think if you look at a list of managers with the worst win ratios in the Premier League, I think you've got Steve Bruce in there, who's the worst, by the way. And then you've got people like Alan Pardew on the list. You've got people like Sam Allardyce on the list, and I think in the list of 6 names we've had 3 or 4 of them, and I think one of the names on the list is Mark Hughes, and he's the favourite to be our next manager. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know. One of the main people on the market is Eddie Howe, and like you said, if we wait much longer, then someone else is going to sack their manager and Eddie Howe is going to take a position with them. So I completely agree with you.
Just wanted to ask you a question, Kendall, maybe come in at slightly different angle on this one. Obviously, it's no secret, and we all know what sort of level manager Steve Bruce is, and he's an extremely poor manager. As Reece pointed out there, statistically, we say he's the worst win percentage
Yeah,
he's one that we
played 100 games or managed 100 games in the Premier League.
Yeah.
He has the worst win ratio by 6%, so 27%.
Yeah. So obviously we know statistically that's an awful record, and the manager takes a huge responsibility over the team. Obviously, the angle I wanted to come at and ask you as well was obviously the players themselves do have an amount of responsibility, and obviously they haven't been performing. And I was speaking to Reece, I think it was yesterday. Obviously, I gave the opinion that I didn't think that the squad was brilliant. I think there are a lot of players that aren't up to the standard. And we mentioned sort of managers. What I wanted to ask really was if Steve Bruce was to leave, or if he was to get the sack, and perhaps he got the sack within good time to get a replacement. What do you really think another manager could do with this exact group of players, and where they could maybe get them, and if maybe an Eddie Howe, or if you had an idea of somebody else, you take Steve Bruce, which is the problem, and replace him with somebody else. Where do you kind of think this group of players could realistically be in the league?
So I think, look, I hate the constant Rafa comparisons. I hate it. Steve Bruce and Rafa are absolutely miles apart, in my opinion. I don't think there's no comparison to be made there. However, players like, and obviously Reece will probably agree with me, players like Fabian Schär, Jamal Lascelles, not Shelby as much because he wasn't really under favour with Rafa, but Sean Longstaff, ignoring the obviously long-term injury that he had. Players like that under Rafa Benitez were vital to that squad, absolutely vital. Like at one point when obviously Rafa was there with Fabian Schär, he had like interest from Inter Milan, teams like that. So, and right now he is one of the players for me who has regressed hugely under Steve Bruce, massively. And if you're playing defensive football and you have defenders whose ability is then being undermined completely by the system that you're playing, it's a worry for me, because I think, well, that's what you need to be relying on if you are going to play defensive football. The football prior to Steve Bruce wasn't pretty, don't get me wrong. I'm not even remotely suggesting that at all. However, it was reliable. And there was a stat the other day on Twitter where it just showed you the comparisons between Benitez and Bruce. And Benitez's was like far beyond what Steve Bruce was currently doing, like with goals scored, chances created, possession held, things like that. So yes, the players have an onus, and obviously the onus has to be shared between the players and the manager, because the manager's not going onto the pitch to, he's not playing the game, so that's fair enough. But just with his coaching experience, he's admitted in the past he doesn't do tactics, things like that. And he's even just come out a couple of days ago and said, I am a bang average manager. And I'm thinking, why would you actually admit that? Like, that is embarrassing. Like, why would a bang average manager want to be a Premier League manager? That's just strange to me. So I feel like if another manager came in, like an Eddie Howe, for example, who is probably slightly more forward thinking than a Steve Bruce, and has history of some of the players, i.e. Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser, has history with young talent. So like Jamal Lewis has just looked like a shadow. Honestly, I feel so sorry for the kid, because at 22 years old, you don't want to be having a really, really bad season, because that can completely affect your career when you're coming into like your prime years. So like mid-20s. So I feel like a manager who has more forward-thinking aspect and understands the modern game better, because as we've probably seen, I mean, I don't know if you guys, with you being Man United fans, have watched a lot of Newcastle, but we don't have like the way the Premier League is at the moment, and the sort of new style of modern football that Pep and stuff have brought to the league. Like, we just cannot compete with that currently under the system that we have at all. Like, we cannot do that. And with the attackers that we have, I personally feel like that's probably the strongest area in our team. So we've got Callum Wilson, who is a decent striker. He's a goal poacher. He's in the right place at the right time. He's just not getting the service. We have St. Maximin. Obviously, he's been missing. Almiron. We have players who, I mean, even Dwight Gale to an extent. We have players who can play attacking football and who can score goals and have in the past. So there's no reason for us now to have scored the least away goals in the league. like there's just no reason for it, especially when defenses of teams are so weak this year. It's just like an issue for me. So I feel like a new manager will probably just know how to utilise players better, because you've got Steve Bruce who's playing Joe Linton on the wing. It's like, yes, he's not a striker, but as we've seen in a few games that he's played, he has showed the most improvement when he's played alongside Callum Wilson.
Yeah.
So like he just doesn't have a clue on how to play players in the correct position, and like playing Jeff Hendrick as a winger and that, like it stresses us out. I honestly, it really, really does truly stresses out at a maximum level. I just feel so angry when I think about his tactics, and for a football manager who's had that much experience, you'd just think he would know better. But yeah, I just think the manager would just know how to get more out of the players. And I don't think we're a top like 10 side. Like God no, I don't. But you know, not to be 14th, 13th every year. Like, because the past 3 seasons, I think we've had 44 points, 45 points, 44 points. And I just want a little bit of improvement. Like, God, if we got 10th, like we did the promotion season with Rafa, I'd be overjoyed. Like, I genuinely will be so happy, because I feel like you can build on that. So once you've been 10th, next year you can be 8th, next year you can be Europa League. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just where I see it. But I don't think that's where Steve Bruce or Mike Ashley sees it. I think they're just happy with safety every year, and it's, you know, the race to 40 points like it usually is. So I just want a manager who actually wants to progress and wants to use the players in a decent way.
Yeah. I mean, to build on what Kendall's saying there, I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that Steve Bruce wants to progress. I don't necessarily think he's got the ability to do so. I think that's the major problem. I think in preparing for this podcast earlier on, I tried to sit down and have a think about, you know, the season so far, Steve Bruce's tenure at Newcastle as a whole, and I think listing all the problems down on a piece of paper and trying to find a reason for why that problem has occurred, it all just, you can draw an arrow back to the same point, and that arrow is the style of play. You look at the amount of money he's spent since Rafa Benitez. You know, there's obviously going to be a drop in performance when you lose a manager of Rafa Benitez's quality and bring in someone like Steve Bruce. There's obviously going to be a drop, and that was a drop off a cliff. And after that point, you need to see a gradual incline in performance. And Steve Bruce has spent £125 million. I think he spent £40 million on Joe Linton. Yeah. They brought him in. They made him a number 9. Steve Bruce said how good, you know, he'd bringing in a good striker like him is. Only for 2 months later to say, well, he's not really a striker. They spent £25 million on St. Maximin, 15 on Jamal Lewis. By the way, a left back who was recruited because of his attacking skills at Norwich, only to be told to be pinned to his own goal line, which is why he's struggling. Then you look at the acquisition of Wilson, £20 million, Fraser, who's going to be on decent wages because he was a free transfer. And there's been no improvement. If anything, there's been a gradual decline in performance. You know, you can look at all the stats that, you know, that come in, how we rank amongst teams in the league in terms of our touches in opposition box, expected goals and things like that. And again, like I said, it all comes back to the same thing, and that's the style of play. And if they were to bring in a manager like Eddie Howe, who has a record of outscoring oppositions, we have a defence who have proved in the past, and different managers, that they can defend, that they can keep clean sheets, that they can, if they want to, bank up into a 5, into a 4, and be resilient when called upon. But now we've got an attack, like Kendall says, that's really exciting. And I rank that attack in the top 8 or 9 attacks in the league. And there's no reason to play the way he plays. But this is what he does when you bring in a manager of Steve Bruce, who's only ever managed relegation threatened teams, whether that is the fault of the manager or the fault of, you know, the club and the team. He only knows how to play one way, and that's with his back to the wall. And bringing in a new manager is not enough unless you're bringing in a new manager with an attacking outlook, something that you can build on.
Yeah, do you know Steve Bruce is an interesting character, right? And Kendall, you touched upon the industry as a whole and how everyone's kind of connected, like there's a 6 degrees of separation. One thing this industry, I suppose, hopefully one day we'll all find out, is it's kind of run by money, right? And I look at Steve Bruce and I think to myself, you had a very successful career at Manchester United, to the point he probably didn't need to work again. And then he took all these other footballing jobs, Wigan, Hull, Sheffield United, Sunderland as well, which I'll come on to now. And he earned very good money. In football, there seems to be, for some people, there's a disparity between sort of loyalty and morals and money. So there's some people that will do anything for money. Now, Michael Owen is another key one. Michael Owen went to Newcastle for money, didn't really care about Newcastle. He's like, I'm going to secure the bag, let me get paid, and then I'll move on. And then Michael Owen did the same at Manchester United. He cries now because Liverpool fans say, you're not a legend at Liverpool. And he's like, well, yeah, I am. Of course I am. And they're like, Michael, you moved to Manchester United. You can't be this fucking stupid. You're not a Liverpool legend. Now, Michael Owen can't grasp that because he is money motivated. And Steve Bruce is the same. So I'm right thinking, Kendall, was he born in the Northeast? He says he grew up a Newcastle fan, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. So he was born in Hexham, which is like a couple of miles, well, I would say about 8 miles outside of the city centre of Newcastle. So it is relatively local. And as far as I'm aware, Newcastle was him and his dad's club. But as he's reiterated in the past, it was his boyhood club.
Yeah.
Which makes me obviously think now that he probably hasn't cared about us one slight ounce since he was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
So obviously I just feel like he's a Man United fan. I always call him Man United agent. So
he's consistently talked smack about Newcastle throughout his managerial career as well, which is not something you do really if your lifelong dream was to manage Newcastle.
If you balance that with Jose Mourinho, who has absolutely not really any affiliation with Newcastle United at all, apart from Bobby Robson. Jose Mourinho has never, even when we've defeated him, has never, and I mean never, I will honestly challenge anyone to read an interview post Newcastle playing any of his teams. He has never, ever once said anything negative about the club. He's always positively spoke about us, always said how much of a great club we are, how great the fans are. Even gone to the point as to far as the point of calling him a little magpie, like calling himself a little magpie. Yet you have the manager of your club who has in the past managed your closest rivals in terms of, geographical rivals and has slated you down to the ground and then wants to tell everyone that he's a fan. It's like...
It's slimy. That's what and I see that there. And again, you look at the morals of a man and you can tell a lot about a man by his morals. So, for example, Mauricio Pochettino, right? Mauricio Pochettino managed Spurs and I think he played for Espanyol. And he's come out various times and he said, look, those are my affiliations. You will never see me manage Barcelona or Arsenal because there's no amount of money that can get me to do that because those are my affiliations. That's where my heart is. And if Steve Bruce is going around saying, "Oh well, I grew up. I was Mr. Newcastle. My bedroom was black and white. I had a magpie on my shoulder every day." Well, bro, why did you take the Sunderland job? Because you took the money. That's what you get in that industry. You get people like him that they talk a good talk, but they've got no moral fiber. And that's the same with his football. Like it reflects his character, reflects his football. It's just. I don't know. It's just I don't like him. I just don't like anything about Steve Bruce. I'll be perfectly honest with you. And when you have a relationship that gets off on the wrong foot immediately, it's never going to end well. Like immediately, all those Newcastle fans are like, "Well, you manage Sunderland, and you're saying you're a Newcastle fan," and all of a sudden,
did take him down. To be fair, so he was a legend at the time.
Yeah, but it's such a toxic relationship to begin with, and. What you have to have then, and in life, and not everyone has it. Which Kendall, you can attest to this. Some men have some, a bit of finesse. Others don't. Some are, are quite good at winning you over, and then others aren't. And Steve Bruce coming in on the back foot, he immediately needs to finesse the Newcastle fans and make them feel special and be like, look, we're going to make this work on one of you. And he constantly gets it wrong all the time. And it's like he can't. It's past the point of no return now. He cannot get them on side. I don't think there's anything he could do to get them on side. It's at some point now they've got to pull the trigger because ultimately, if it stays as it is, they're down. And Becky, I want your opinion on it as well. Is there a cut-off point now, or are we past that cut-off point for Steve Bruce?
With them removing him?
Yeah, removing him. Yeah.
Well, no. It's we're halfway through the season, so there's still plenty of time for them to act now. Even if they acted, 3 or 4 games on the line, that there is still time. But Reece mentioned, in prior seasons they've waited too long to pull the trigger. and you look where it's got them. But you know, Mike Ashley runs the club, and again, we've mentioned this already. He's not one to learn from his lessons. I don't really think he cares that much about lessons. And you mentioned, you know, is there anything that Steve Bruce can do to get the fans back on side? The only thing he can do is win football matches, and he's statistically the least likely man to do that. So,
yeah,
you know, they're not past the point of no return. You know, there is always hope, no matter how slim it is. But the window that they have to act on it is getting smaller and smaller every week.
Yeah.
And Reece, you know, me and Spooner listen to you every week about Newcastle, and I can hear how depressed you are, and it's coming on to me and Spooner. You know, it makes us down, and you know, we're not Newcastle fans by any stretch, but I'd want to see them get rid of him just for you Newcastle fans, just to give you some kind of small hope. I mean, you know, you could, like you say, go around in circles, and they could bring somebody else in who's got like a Mark Hughes, you know, which is, you know, what do you say then? You know, you think, oh well, it's different, but is it just more the same? So, well, I'd like them to act pretty soon. I don't know if they will, just to see a bit of a change of tune in you know. So yeah, like, the window's getting smaller, but there is still hope. There is always hope.
Yeah, on the subject of winning the fans around as well. I mean, it might not be simple enough to just win football matches. For a fan like me, who at the moment, when we lose, it makes me angry. When we win, it makes me angry because Steve Bruce gets more time.
I get that so much. I literally feel that in my heart. Like, so, honestly, like, you lose and you're not even that bothered because you're like, oh well, another game closer to him getting sacked. Like, that's honestly, at this point, I never want my team to lose. But when we do, it's like,
it could be the day.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, that just draws an arrow to the style of play. Now, Kendall, I want to tell you a quote from Warren Barton. We spoke to Warren Barton a few weeks ago, and he was talking to us about the period in his career where Alan Shearer was struggling and Ruud Gullit. And he said Bobby Robson came in and Alan Shearer was playing with his back to goal for so long, and he was struggling. And Bobby Robson just went up to him in training, turned him round and went, look that way. And in the next game, he scored 8 goals. Newcastle scored 8 goals and Alan Shearer scored 5. I'm not saying that it is always that simple, but I'm saying that it is not hard to change your mentality and say, look, let's just attack. And I think that would be so simple for Steve Bruce to do, but there just is an unwillingness to do so.
Yeah, he just has a massive defeatist attitude though. Like, so even before the game, like pre-match, he's sitting there saying, you know, so Sheffield bloody United, who haven't had a win all season, like literally were on 2 points. Literally, he was like, they're a really great side and they played really well last season. I'm thinking, are you in last season? It's this season, do you know what I mean? Like, we're not looking at last season. They've been awful. And he bigs other teams up and he tells you how hard it's going to be and that we really are work in progress and blah, blah, blah. And he just gives you like this, as I say, it's like an excuse for defeat before you've even gone to the game. So why is then, as a player, would you think, oh, well, I'll go and play my best now? Because he's happy with mediocrity. He's not bothered if you lose. If you lose 1-0, that's a result for Steve Bruce. He's not bothered about that. He never goes into a game to win. It's always not to get beat. And that, for me, like, if you understand that mentality, like, that isn't a huge issue when you want morale of players and you're in, like, dire straits as you are right now. When your morale of players and you're already happy with mediocrity, they're not going to be bothered because they know you're not going to, like, you know, like, pillage them for being crap. Like, it's just that he just doesn't have the... Everyone always says he's a man manager, but I don't see how, because if you're a man manager, you want the best out of your players and, like, you've got to be a little bit more ruthless, but he just takes that too far, man management too far, in the sense he wants to be their mate. And it's like, well, you know, like, you want to get relegated with your mates? Like, not really. You know, like, I wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? They're not my mate. You're not my mate if you get me relegated.
Yeah. You know, so if you were to pick a bottom 3 right now, then, based upon the evidence we've seen thus far, you can include Newcastle if you want as well. Let's say relegation was tomorrow. Who do you think would get relegated based upon the evidence you've seen?
Sheffield United, definitely, because I think they're too far gone now. West Brom, but I don't think Big Sam will take them down. I think he'll leave before he takes them down. He won't want to tarnish his record because he's just that sort of person. And I would probably put Brighton and Burnley in the mix, but in the past, Burnley have always kicked on second half of the season a lot better. Newcastle, if they go on the way they are and this continues, I wouldn't put it past us, because our next few fixtures are really, really difficult.
Yeah.
But I think 18th place is actually quite hard to call right now, because, as I say, there is teams like Brighton, Burnley, Fulham, for example, but they're now picking up a little bit of points. So yeah, I think 18th place is going to be very, very close and very difficult to call this year.
The funny thing I'm thinking of here is, if Steve Bruce does manage to come 16th, do we then have another season of Steve Bruce? Is that what's going to happen?
Unfortunately, that is what.
Is that what it's going to be now? Is that the cycle? 16th every year, Steve stays in a job, gets the paycheck, everybody drinks Bisto and goes home. Is that what it is? Is that what it's going to be now? Yeah.
It is. I mean, history tells us that.
Is that what it is?
Let's be honest. Let's be honest here for a second. I mean, in the summer, all the pundits believed that the Newcastle takeover was going to happen, and we haven't mentioned that really tonight. Thank God. And they were all saying that, whilst this takeover is going to happen, Steve Bruce needs to be given a chance. And let's be honest for a second. If a takeover was to go through, because these takeover rumours, they just don't fully go away ever. Despite the fact that you want them to, they just don't go away. And if a takeover was to happen, Steve Bruce wouldn't survive. The way that the club needs to go, he's not capable of pushing them in that direction. No chance.
It almost seems like them going down would be one of the only ways that you might shake Steve Bruce. Because you say if you finish with 15th or 16th, there's a real possibility that you might get another year Steve Bruce, because that's the sort of level that him and Ashley seem to be content with. So obviously you guys going down would be a disaster for a club of that size, and and everything that comes with Newcastle. But I wonder if that's the kind of thing that would have to happen, for him to go and you to get somebody else and come back up.
The idiotic thing, if that does happen though, is the takeover's off. That has been a criteria from the start. If Newcastle were in the Championship, the takeover wasn't going ahead. So it would be very idiotic of Mike Ashley. I mean, look, he's made some very stupid decisions in his past. We all know that. I don't think he's rarely made a good one, apart from appointing Rafa Benitez at this point. But for him to watch this club go and get relegated, and then just completely finish any takeover, would be very stupid, considering he's spending a lot on court processes right now to, for arbitration with the Premier League and things. It would just be, and this is why I don't understand why he's letting it carry on, because if we let this roll on and roll on and roll on, it's just going to be harder to get out of it, as we've learned in the past. It's just not the way the league is this year. You can't even predict a result at this point. So it's going to be really a struggle, and it obviously is very, very stupid from a business perspective. I mean, I'm not a businessman, clearly, but for me, it's a very stupid business perspective to want your team, to allow the possibility of your club going down so that you don't have a takeover. It's just weird to me.
Yeah, it's essentially just like not having business insurance, isn't it? Essentially, you're just gambling on mediocrity, and I think that Mike Ashley knows this at this stage. He's done various interviews on TV saying that he's not rich enough to pump money into the club, and whether you buy that or not, considering he's buying every shop on the high street, is one thing. Believing he's got agenda is another. But if you are a Premier League club owner and you're not significantly investing in the club, I mean, I will give him his dues. He's put £125 million into the club under Steve Bruce. He's backed him where he wouldn't back Rafa Benitez, and that's another talking point. But if you're not going to significantly invest in your team, appoint the right people, get the right infrastructure in your club, and try to grow it, then you're going to remain like Burnley, and Burnley will never have a season where they're not at risk of relegation, and it's always going to be a possibility.
Yeah, do you know what, though? I expect that, with all due respect to the many Burnley fans watching or Brighton fans, I fully expect them to be competing for relegation, because in my eyes, they're Championship clubs that are just, they have their sort of, they're having their moment in the sun in the Premier League. Newcastle are a big club, they're a monster, and I just think Mike Ashley is just, he just underappreciates them. I don't think that from the top down change needs to be implemented. I don't know how it happens. I mean, the worst case scenario, I suppose, is Newcastle get relegated and Mike Ashley is so short of money, having bought up every single shop on the high street, that he just turns around and says, Steve, do you want another season? Do you want to stay again?
Honestly, my brain won't handle that. Like, I'll lose it. I feel like I'll be sectioned or something. I can't put myself through that game.
Yeah, you know what? And there's a variety of different horrible options that could occur. And it'll be interesting how it pans out. We will come off Newcastle in a moment, Kendall, just to give you a breather, because obviously I don't want you to be too stressed tonight. Because I can see Reese is on the edge already. Like Reese is about to go.
Honestly, it brings it at the edge every time.
It does, yeah. But I'm going back to obviously football. Obviously, you have other affiliations as well. So obviously, doing a little bit of research, Atletico Madrid is another club of yours that you're a fan of. Talk me through that one. How did that come about?
So when I was 9 years old, I went on holiday with my family, and we were just, me, my granddad and my brother, we always used to go and try and watch like a local game wherever we were on holiday when we were younger. And we were just walking around, where were we? Oh, we were near Barcelona. We were in Salou, and we were just walking around, like just exploring, and we came across this like decent sized stadium, but you could kind of just like go in, like the turnstiles are like open, you could just go in. And we went to watch them, this sort of friendly game. And when we got sort of further into it, it was actually Barcelona reserves against Atletico Madrid reserves at the time. So we watched the game and I absolutely fell in love, like literally fell in love with this particular player. And I was like, oh my God, I was 9. I was like, I'm going to marry him when I'm older. To my granddad. My granddad was like, okay then. Whatever. He's probably like,
as well, though.
He's probably like 15 years older than you. And anyways, that was that. When we got back to the hotel, I was looking about, and it ended up being Fernando Torres.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, like early 2000s, he was captaining Atletico Madrid, one of the youngest captains ever. He was unbelievable. And he'd just come back from injury, so he was just obviously playing in this game. And just thought, total chance that I ended up seeing him completely by chance. And then from then, I just followed him. I followed his career at Atletico Madrid, and obviously had an affiliation with them because I followed them for a few years. And he didn't go to, so this was 2003. He didn't go to Liverpool till 2007. So I had like 4 years of following Atletico, and following Fernando Torres. And then just from that point, I followed his career, and then I also followed Atletico on the side. Like with and without him, so that's why I've followed Atletico Madrid. So I mean, I've been supporting them now as well. I wouldn't say support, because I don't obviously, follow them like I do Newcastle at all. I just watch their games and I follow the team news and things like that. But yeah, I follow them for 14 years now as well. So I obviously don't like attacking football.
Yeah, yeah, Simeone and Bruce. Yeah, I mean, look, Simeone is far better than
yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You were speaking a bit of Spanish as well in one of your videos. Are you fluent?
No, I'm not fluent. I'm conversational, I would say, but I'm not fluent. At the beginning of lockdown last year, I was, because my plan originally, when I started my summer season for cabin crew last year, before I did, was to do the reverse journey from October time. So in the winter, I was going to move to the Canary Islands with my daughter and do the reverse journey. I wanted to speak Spanish so that I could hopefully move there full time post obviously the winter sun season. So yeah, last lockdown I was studying Spanish and trying to speak it myself, but I have spoken it variously in the past, but nothing too major.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll chop this part up afterwards, and you'll be on Telemundo before you know it. Like you'll be doing all the Spanish press, so that's another plus from this. So yeah, no, fair play to you. Like obviously with lockdown, we're all trying to improve and do various things. And when I saw that affiliation, I was like, oh, let me look into that a little bit. So yeah, no, good on you. Fair play for trying to better yourself and obviously branching out. Going back to football as well. Now, what we do with a lot of our guests, obviously we ask them for, well, usually the guests are footballers, so we ask them for their best 11 that they played with. But what we're going to do with you is ask you for the best 11 you've seen thus far in the Premier League. So you can go 1 to 11. You can pick whoever you want. You can have a team of Carl Darlows if you want. It's entirely up to you. From 1 to 11, who has kind of impressed you thus far in terms of?
I'm gonna ask another question as well. Sorry, the best 11 that you've seen live as well.
Oh, 2. Okay. Yeah.
So mixture. Is this from like my whole football supporting career? God, because that's extensive. Because I've had a season ticket since I was 10. So
yeah.
Okay, so striker-wise, got to be Cristiano Ronaldo for me all day long. I love Cristiano Ronaldo. He's one of my top. He's like my top 3. I just adore him. Yeah. Let's just go for a casual 4-4-2. So Shearer and obviously Cristiano Ronaldo. They're my 2 forwards. I would say I've got to put Shearer in there, otherwise I'd look like a freak. The rest. Okay, so this is probably going to shock a lot of people considering I've seen that many matches, but Hatem Ben Arfa's got to be in there for me.
Ben Arfa's a player. He's a good player.
Yeah, because he was just someone at the time, like, I just never thought Newcastle could acquire it, like that sort of level of ball at that point. Yeah. And he could have been so much more if he wasn't Pardewed. But yeah, Hatem Ben Arfa's got to be in there for me. I've seen that many players. It's unbelievable to be hard.
Yeah, it is difficult. I'll tell you what, do a Newcastle one for us, 1 to 11.
Okay, Newcastle probably easier because, like I say, I've seen that many games in the past Premier League games. That'll be hard to pick all of them because obviously it would just be like Premier League 11 and that would just be boring. It would obviously be like
too many options.
And that.
Yeah.
I don't want to like biggies up too much being Man United fans. So yeah, Newcastle. So Gary Speed's got to be midfield for me as well.
Yeah.
Check Tiote, just because I feel like right now that is someone we could so do with, like, just that, the solid centre mid. Like, I would just love someone like Check Tiote at the club now, and because obviously he's not here with us anymore, I just feel like it's more, like, you know, like it's more special. So that would I guarantee probably wouldn't be in anyone's like all-time Newcastle 11, but he is in mine because I just appreciate him so much. Who else have I seen live? I mean, even, I know Kabai's not a winger, but even I will put him in there because I think at his peak.
Yeah, he's a quality player. He's very
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then defender-wise, I would have Colaccini in there.
Okay.
I would have Jose Enrique because I feel like we've not had a left back like that for, look, we've been left with Paul Dummett at left back and bloody Manquillo at right back, you know what I mean? Like, that's just tragedy.
Yeah, what I always say about Paul Dummett is it's not his fault. He's a bang average player because he's from Newcastle and he's playing for the club he loves. They keep giving him a contract. They keep picking him and he keeps doing his best, but it's just not good enough.
No. Very true. They just keep giving him it. Goalkeeper would obviously be Shea Given because my brother's named after Shea Given. His middle name's Shea, so was my dad's favourite football player at the time for Newcastle. So Shea Given's got to be in there.
Right back.
Quite hard when it comes to it.
Yeah.
Really hard.
It's hard to name a good right back that we've had, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm thinking of right backs now.
Stephen Carr, was Stephen Carr at Newcastle, or was he just at Spurs? Stephen Carr was at Newcastle.
Yeah, he retired at us. Yeah.
I mean, like Ryan Taylor, possibly. I don't even know who you would have at right back. Like, when was genuinely the last time we had a good right back? And I think the last decent one, I can't even remember his name, was like late 90s.
Warren Barton.
He may have appeared on the podcast.
Warren Barton. Should we throw in Warren Barton in for that?
Warren Barton in, because I can't even think of anyone else who would literally physically be in there. Right back has been a position for us that we've just never.
Yeah.
I think we've just never had a really, really solid right back. I mean, even like Yedlin and Manquillo and stuff for the past couple of years haven't been like, they've sort of battled it out between them. Do you know what I mean? So we've never had like a really, really good solid right back. So yeah. And another centre back.
So what we got so far? We got Given, we got Warren Barton, we got Colaccini, Enrique. So another centre back.
I always have a problem when people pick their Newcastle teams, or I have a problem picking mine rather, because we've never had a good defence.
No.
It's often
It's so hard because like when you pick someone, you think people are like, really? And I'm like, yeah, because that's what we have been subject to. Like we haven't had like decent. Don't like put your face
that would get played that time. You know, he'd get in, or you know, it's really hard to pick Newcastle defenders.
Let me throw it out there, right? You might maybe that might intrigue you. What about Philippe Albert? What about Philippe Albert? Good defender.
Yes, but I never saw him really because I'm
showing my age, Kendall. I'm actually 62. So
I'm 25. So yes, I saw him on TV. But as the game, so my first season as season ticket holder was 2006.
Yeah.
So I haven't really seen Albert in a sense of there at right now. So that's why I'm struggling with my team because my first season was when Mike Ashley took over, and since then it has been atrocious. So that is why I'm mega struggling with the Newcastle squad because we just haven't had. I mean, to be honest, I must admit, I think Fernandez has probably been one of the like most solid defenders we've had in a good long time, and I think he's quite underrated, to be fair to him, for the job that he's done. I mean, he played every minute of every game last season.
Yeah, he's not a bad little player.
No, and for a football player to do that, it's like really, because a lot of them, obviously a lot of injuries are rife now. Obviously, look at Virgil van Dijk. I mean, I know that was Little Arms' fault, but we'll not get into that probably. But bit of it's actually really hard to pick a Newcastle 11. I would say really hard.
Yeah, it is. No, funny story about Fernandez while we're here, just off topic. Like, so he's an ex-Swansea player as well. I saw Federico Fernandez in Tesco's in Swansea trying to buy alcohol to go to an Ashley Williams house party, and he got ID'd by the woman. And obviously at the time he was a big name in Swansea, right? And this woman ID'd him for alcohol, not knowing who he was, and blatantly refused to serve him, right? And he was just so embarrassed in front of everyone, and I felt bad for him. And when he moved to Newcastle, I said, "Yeah, good on you. Yeah, you get out of here because we're not doing nothing for you down these parts." So
they don't ID in Newcastle. That's for sure.
They don't ID in Newcastle. Yeah. So that's a funny Fernandez story. But yeah, that's a decent team thus far. Though, given who else we have? Barton. We'll put in Fernandez for now. Who else do we have? Enrique. Who's the other centre back we had?
Colaccini.
Colaccini. Yeah. Then we got. Kabay, Penarfa, and then Shearer, and
I did pick Cristiano Ronaldo at the beginning because we were on about people I've seen live. We're going to go Newcastle. Cisse.
Good shout. Lord Cisse, as he's known as. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There we go.
That's hero Cisse.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good 11, actually. Newcastle actually had some decent players. Obviously, Kendall, as you say, you missed the glory years a little bit. There was a cut-off point, and since then, it's all been downhill. But the only way is up, I guess. So that's interesting that you picked that. That's cool. Going back to, obviously, YouTube and a few other bits and pieces now, especially with you being pushed to the forefront. For all of us now, we sort of have a goal that we're working towards where we do more media work and various other things. What is your career path as a young woman now? Especially, a lot of women now and young girls will look up to you and they'll be like, she's, in a really male sort of dominated world and she's doing her thing and, they'll want to be like you. So what kind of career path are you trying to go down? Is there a particular thing you want to do?
So for all my life, I said Sky Sports News was my dream job. I've said that from being very, very young. And then throughout school, obviously with football being such a male-dominated world, and obviously only seeing like minimal female presenters growing up, like obviously Kirsty Gallagher and like Gabby Logan, people like that. I didn't really think it was reachable at the time, and where I went to school, it just wasn't something that took me. I took on board really. I didn't think it was attainable at the time. So actually, people always laugh because like, oh, did you go to uni? Like, what did you do at uni? Blah blah blah. Considering I'm cabin crew now, and actually I did forensic science and crime scene investigation at uni.
Perfect for Newcastle. Yeah, they're great.
Because my dream was to be a detective, and that's what I wanted to do. That's still a very achievable career goal for me, but as I got older and I realised, obviously, the age of social media was a thing, and, you know, like, things have happened more where women are getting more attention in football.
Yeah.
Sort of being a football presenter has kind of come back to be a passion of mine. I mean, it was always a passion, but I never thought it was a sort of an attainable goal. But right now, the way things are going and what I'm seeing and the opportunities that are coming my way that I'm so grateful for, I actually feel like it's probably, it is, maybe it's not Sky Sports News-esque, but like something in the future where, because obviously I haven't done journalism or anything, but something in the future where I could, you know, present a football show or something along the lines of that. And I would love that. That is just something that if I ever achieve that, I'll be over the moon, because I honestly genuinely never thought it was a thing. So I would love that. Absolutely love it.
But you know what? YouTube's changed the game. Like, you know, we are the platform now that people gravitate towards. You know, even Match of the Day, you know, it doesn't do the numbers that it used to do. And a lot of people gravitate towards these platforms. And I always say, look, no dream is too big. You know, if you you put in the right amount of work and you do what you do, especially right now, you know, women in sport and in football, it's massive. Like, it's every other day it's getting bigger and bigger. And with that being said, I just wanted to touch upon women's football very quickly, because obviously women's football, it does cause a little bit of controversy in certain areas. Like, I'll be honest with you, right? I've never watched a game of women's football. It's just, nobody's ever said, oh, did you see, you know, United City women's game? I've never gravitated towards it. So I don't necessarily want to be too harsh in it. But when you, for example, you see things like equal pay from a sort of a female standpoint, obviously it's very empowering. But then as a football fan, what's your take on, obviously, equal pay for women in football? Do you think it's the right thing, or do you think there should be a cut-off point?
I do get it, because, you know, companies and organisations are so scared about discrimination and things now that it's kind of, I feel like it's their hand is kind of forced a little bit, because we're all very aware, and if you're a football fan, you know that women's football doesn't generate the revenue that men's football does, especially globally. So I feel like, as much as equal pay is fair enough, because I mean, women and men are doing the same job in that sort of area, in the sense that they're going out and they're playing a game of football for their team. The revenue that is generated in order to pay women equally to the men, I think it's only like rolled out in terms of national teams at this current time, but is obviously, it's going to be difficult long term, because unless women's football continues on the rise, because I mean, I know a lot of people, even me included, I don't personally watch women's football league wise. I do watch the World Cup and any tournaments that go on, which I feel like a lot of people probably do, but I don't tend to watch women's football, because I just don't feel, and this is not me saying that there's not skillful women footballers out there who can probably do as much of a job as men's footballers can, because I mean, there's some really shit men's footballers, not mentioning no names. So, you know, I'm not saying that at all. However, I just feel the women's game is a huge level below the men's game. But on the piggyback of that, it is due to funding, it's due to women's levels of coaching, it is due to, as I say, the revenue that is generated by men's football. Women's football just does not reach the heights of that. In order to get better coaches, in order to get better facilities, you know, push the women's game more. So there is a cause for every reason as to why women's football isn't on the level of men's. But it would be nice to, obviously, for it to get more recognition. I think that would be amazing with all these new pundits coming in, like Alex Scott, for example. She's going to bring it to a head and things like that. And obviously, I feel like, I think it was Man United, whoever you got, a women's footballer you guys signed in the summer, her shirt outsold every one of the men's shirts. So I mean, that is huge. That's like amazing, considering, you know, you guys got players like Cavani, for example, and at the same time. So yeah, it would be nice for it to, you know, reach better heights than it is, and for more people to be interested in it. But I do feel like the game is a league behind, but as I said, there's always a cause for that, and it is due to the interest and the revenue that it gains. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting times, all right. Yeah, I can definitely see the female game growing, and obviously that presents a lot of opportunities for someone like yourself as well. So yeah, we obviously will hopefully we hope it does grow. I don't think it'll ever be the men's game as such,
No.
but there's no reason it can't get to a decent level. Yeah, so no, that's a good shout. Lads, was there anything else you wanted to go over with Kendall before we let her go?
No, pretty much all my questions and
You're all
frustrations.
Mike Ashley'd out, Reese, yeah?
But
Yeah.
today, it'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah, it's never too far away, is it, in fairness? Yeah. No, that's cool. Well, Kendall, we appreciate you. Thank you again for taking the time to come on. Obviously,
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, guys.
Pleasure is all ours. Pleasure is all ours, believe me. Hopefully we can have you on again. For everybody that's watching, if you haven't subscribed to Kendall, make sure you do. We'll put her Twitter and IG in the description below. And obviously make sure you follow us up as well and smash that like button and subscribe. We'll be back next week. We'll have more content coming, as will Kendall. And we'll be back next time, people. Take care. Ciao.